Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for ellenhudson.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing 5 ways to use the Essentials by Ellen A2 piercing plate and the A2 piercing plate number 2. Now these are very similar products. The difference is that the A2 piercing plate, the original, has each of these pierced holes about 1/8 of an inch apart. The A2 piercing plate 2 has the pierced holes a little bit closer together. And this is National Embroidery Month. This is the perfect die to pull out and practice some paper embroidery, but I'm going to show you other ways to use this as well. So here's a look at some paper die cut with each of these plates. And this is the cardstock that I'm going to be using, and I will have that linked in the YouTube description for you. So I'm starting out with my cardstock and I'm cutting it into 1-inch strips. I'm going to make a background. And the first thing that we're going to do is just use the A2 piercing plate to add a little bit of texture to a background. So I have my colors here. I love this bright and cheery rainbow. And I am cutting down a piece of Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. So it's a little bit smaller than you would maybe normally make your card front, but I like that nice big wide border around this card front. Now that I have my cardstock cut down, I am covering the entire front of it with the Gina K dot runner adhesive. You could use a sheet adhesive if you prefer as well. You could use liquid glue so that you could kind of maneuver these into place, whatever your preference is. And I'm starting out by getting that top stripe perfectly like squared up, because once I put that one down, I'm going to use it as a guide to place the additional stripe colors that I have. And I'm just going to work my way down this cardstock, making sure that each of the stripes is butted up against the previous one. Now there is some overhang, so I took it over to my trimmer and I just trimmed off along that one side. You can see it's sticking off the bottom as well, but that really doesn't matter to me. So once I have that trimmed down, I am going to use the You Oughta Know stamp set. This is an older Essentials by Ellen stamp set with these adorable playful flowers. And I'm going to ink up this flower cluster using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne Pigment ink. And I'm going to stamp that down using my Misty stamping tool. So when you see me open this lid, you're going to see that the pattern on its own is beautiful, but I wanted to add a little bit of texture to this. So I hit it with my heat tool. And now I'm positioning it onto the A2 piercing plate. This is the original piercing plate. I'm getting that centered and squared up so that my pattern is kind of straight across this and there's nothing wonky or crooked. And I'm holding it in place with some repositionable adhesive. And then I'm gonna run it through my Gemini Junior to press or to pierce those holes. Now this isn't gonna go all the way through, but it's gonna make that really cool pierced pattern all over this card front. And it's a great way to give any sort of card front or background a little bit of texture. Now to finish off this card, I'm adding some foam adhesive to the back of this card front. I'm just removing the backer. And then I am adding this onto a top folding A2 size card. Now at this point, I had added it onto a white top folding A2 size card. I actually go back in the end and change that to an ivory card base. And I love the mix of the bright colors with the ivory. It's kind of a little bit of a retro feeling. This sentiment is a hello sentiment from the Mondo Hello die set from the Essentials by Ellen line. And this little sub sentiment I embossed with some gold embossing powder onto some white cardstock. And that sentiment is from the You Ought to Know stamp set. It is the same stamp set that those flowers came from. So to finish this card off, I'm just adding a few sparkling clear sequins with some honeybee liquid adhesive, and that finishes off my first card featuring adding texture using the piercing plate. Now these piercing plates are also great to stamp on. Now you would think that because it has those pierced, they're not really truly all the way through holes. They're pierced pattern. You would think that they wouldn't stamp so well, but they actually stamp really great. I am using the You Are Awesome stamp set from the Essentials by Ellen line and some inks from Concord and Ninth to stamp this little rainbow onto this Neenah Solar White cardstock that I've already die cut with the A2 piercing plate number 2. Now we added a die cut texture to our first card. We're stamping on it for our second card. And my third idea for using these A2 piercing plates is to add some stitched details to stamped images. So I am taking this metallic gold thread from DMC, I believe it is, and I'm going to thread my needle, and I am going to use the piercing pattern that is already on this card front to create kind of a zigzag pattern on this rainbow using this metallic thread. Now, these plates pierce the paper. It doesn't make a hole all the way through. So I find it easiest as I'm getting started to kind of poke through the hole that I want to come up through with my needle, and then I can start my stitching and come up from the back so that my ends are on the back and not on the front of my card. So I'm just getting this stitching started, and what I've done is I've put the two ends of my thread through the eye of the needle, and that leaves me with a loop at the end of my thread. So when I bring that up, I can actually thread my needle back through that loop, and it will hold it in place on my card back. This is a tip I actually learned on the reels from the ellenhudson.com Instagram account. So I was thankful for whoever created that video because it was a really great tip. Now, these pierced holes are not always going to line up right on the edge of the stamped pattern, and that's okay, especially since I'm creating with a stamp that has curves on it and not straight lines. But I just kind of went to the closest hole that worked, created a zigzag pattern, and now I have this really adorable metallic detail on my rainbow. Now, the third idea, and this is a little bit different, even though it seems the same, is to use these piercing plates for paper embroidery. And in my mind, paper embroidery differs a little bit than the previous technique because you're actually creating it on the card without a stamped image as a guide. So I traced out a little cloud to kind of stitch around the border of, and now I am using some embroidery floss from DMC. This is available in the ellenhudson.com online store, by the way, and I am just stitching around that cloud pattern that I drew on there. So a little bit different in that I'm not using a stamp as my guide. Now, I've done a really simple cloud here, but some people are really great at paper embroidery, and they do like pearl stitches and create florals with their stitching, and it is absolutely beautiful. But I wanted to show you that it can be a very simple technique as well. Now, I am using the Good Day Sunshine Sentiment from the Good Day stamp set, and I'm stamping it onto this panel that I die cut using the Essentials by Ellen Essential Rectangles. And then I have some more of that colored cardstock cut into strips. I'm gonna lay that at an angle across my top folding A2 size card base, and I am just going to adhere those in place, trim off the excess, and then I will add this panel onto my card front using some foam adhesive. So we have 4 different techniques so far, and actually the 5th one I've already showed you, but I didn't mention it because I was a little sneaky like that. But the 5th way to use this piercing plate is to create some pierced pattern on your paper and then die cut it. Now in today's first card, I actually already did this because the Hello sentiment is actually die cut from a sheet of ivory cardstock that I die cut first using the piercing plate. So now I'm taking these various colors of colored cardstock, I'm attaching them to just a piece of typing paper, and I'm going to put my piercing plate over the top of this and run this through my die cut machine. Now I have this great pattern on this cardstock, and I can die cut it into any shape that I want. Now I'm using the classic block alpha from the Essentials by Ellen line to die cut the word hello. So I've held these dies in place using a little bit of repositionable tape so that I make sure that they stay straight with that pierced pattern. I didn't want the pattern to be wonky, although you could turn these at a little bit of an angle and do it that way. Now I used the straight edge of my piercing plate to line up these letters, and now I'm using some repositionable tape to kind of pick them all up in one go, and that way it'll make it really easy when I go to adhere these onto my card front. Now for the card front, I have a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and I'm masking off a portion, and I'm going to use this You Oughta Know stamp set once again to create a floral pattern below that Post-it tape border. I'm using Post-it tape today. You could use painter's tape. You could use a piece of typing paper to create your masking, or masking paper. It really doesn't matter. I'm just using it to create that nice crisp diagonal line on this card front. So I am stamping this using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne pigment ink, and I am filling in all the spaces on the lower portion of this diagonal line. So I'm going to have a really cool, fun floral pattern, very graphic, and I am going to juxtapose it with these really beautiful, bright hello letters above that. Now I wanted a little touch of metallic, so I added some gold cardstock that I cut into a strip just at an angle along that stamped edge. And then I added my letters on using some foam adhesive, and I just positioned those onto the card front using that tape that I had picked them up with. Now I'm adding my card front onto an A2 top folding ivory card base that I created with the Hero Arts Antique Ivory cardstock. And I finished this off with a few sparkling clear sequins as well. So here's a look at the 3 cards I created with 5 different ways to use the A2 piercing plate and the A2 piercing plate number 2. These are really fun dies, and I hope that you will pull them out for National Embroidery Month and give them a try. Give it a go. You never know what kind of technique you're going to fall in love with. And paper embroidery is just one way to use these really fun piercing plates. Now, as always, I will have links to the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube. So if you're looking for something in particular or the colors of cardstock that I use, be sure you check there. Or you can head on over to the ellenhudson.com coordinating blog post. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As always, thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed these projects. I hope they have inspired you in some way, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give the video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on this YouTube channel so you don't miss any of the paper crafting and card making video tutorials shared here. As always, I'm so thankful you're here. I'm so thankful that you chose to spend your time hanging out with me today. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.